ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another fabulous episode. You're locked and loaded into the I.M.A.G.E podcast. I've got my main man in the house with me, Jerome Bay, and we're going to talk about something that's very important. I think that this is going to be very, very attraction-seeking, not only to the community, but across the nation. As we know, the I.M.A.G.E program is now nationwide. And so we're going to talk about the 13th Amendment and how the 13th Amendment still exists, how the law even exists according to slavery. Now, we all know that the 13th Amendment was actually enacted or it actually included the abolishment of slavery. And it also states that if you are a prisoner, you are still a slave. We want to talk about it. Now, Rome, I know that you've been doing your research on this. I've been doing my research on this, and we're going to continue to go into this as we move on throughout these episodes, because we ultimately need to end this, the slavery in prison.
I would agree.
So, I get a lot of phone calls. I get a lot of, letters from people who are in prison, and they have all these problems that are going on within the institutions. But because it's so private, and because it's there's no way that the public can actually get involved with what's going on, there are a lot of problems that's going on, and it's demanding the attention of society.
I would agree. And with that being said, I would say this here. As you brought up the 13th Amendment, for those who do not actually know the 13th Amendment, I have taken some excerpts from the Constitution of the United States. First and foremost, people need to remember that the forefathers wrote the Constitution. Now, as far as slavery is concerned, within the prison complex, that is applied to everybody that goes into prison, because you're working at 10 cent, 20 cent, 30 cent an hour. And you're expected to get out of prison with a minimal gate allotment to return to society after 10, 20, 30 years and develop a lifestyle. But basically, the 13th Amendment says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime whereof the party should have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Congress passed on January 31st, 1865, and ratified on December 6, 1865, the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery in the United States, and provides that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime whether the party should have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States. So, if you get convicted of a crime, you go into prison.
Okay, now let me just stop you before you go into that.
Wait.
Okay, now, so the 13th Amendment states that slavery has ended in society.
In 1865. It was abolished.
It was abolished,
Right.
1965.
Right.
Now, why is it then that it was still okay for prisoners to be slaves, but society wasn't? Because I know if you go back to the slave catching and the policing and how the police started as slave catchers, then they took the African Americans and convicted them and, made them criminals. Or I'm not going to say made them criminals, but they manipulated the whole criminal justice system back then. Okay, where they still made slaves, they wanted to keep them, so they made them criminals, because that was the only legal way that they could do it.
Right.
And then now we have some black people who are basically still held back into slavery through this 13th Amendment.
Through that system.
Now, it's gone away for the most part in society. However, ladies and gentlemen, it still exists in prison. I, Robert Pate, did 11 consecutive years, and I share this story all the time. Jerome Darren Bay did 26 years straight, okay? And we had the insight and the understanding to be able to see that not only does slavery still exist in prison, but it's destroying our community. And when I say it's destroying our community, I mean 90% of the people that go to prison are getting out, which means they're gonna be your neighbor someday, which means that behavior still seeps back into the community. Now, we wanna keep our community safe. We have to deal with this issue. We have to deal with the Department of Corrections. It actually was created through the name Corrections to correct. Okay? Now, we need to be able to start standing on this stuff because the prison system is big money. And I believe that's why this hasn't been talked about. A lot of people, they start these type of trends and then stop. We want to make sure that we don't stop. And I think that, first of all, dealing with this 13th Amendment and this law, Constitution, as it sets in place, gives prisoners, gives COs, gives wardens, gives counselors, it gives everyone the rights to be able to hold this up. And what I mean by that is you still see prison guards treating people unfairly. You find a lot of racism. You find a lot of stuff that goes back to where this was all created and how it all started. So again, and I want to stay on track here. So Rome, why don't you go ahead and talk?
Okay, thank you for letting me interject into this. Okay, now, it's a complex issue, the 13th Amendment, in the concept in which we're speaking from. And as Mr. Page said, during the 70s, the S&L failed, and a lot of farmers lost their land. And the banks weighed in on it, and there was a lot of deprivation within the farmlands. So as a result, prior to the 70s, most rural communities would not allow prisons to be built in their neighborhoods. But after the S&L collapse, these communities, due to resources that were available through the states and the federal government, allowed prisons to be built. So that's what created the prison boom. And as a result of the prison boom, they needed bodies to fill these prisons, which produced jobs for rural communities. That's why you don't see many prisons in inner city neighborhoods. But with that being said, once this took place, corporations started coming into the prison because they could hire labor more cheaply. So they would pay the prisoner 20 cents an hour, 30 cents an hour, 40 cents an hour. And so in the 80s, the increase of the prison population went up. And this, you can track all this through the data that's out there. And organizations like Unicor within the prison systems and in the Department of Corrections manifested themselves, and they started utilizing prison labor because it was cheap labor. And this labor would go to building goods that were supposed to be solely provided to the federal government. But they got into other areas of commerce and continued to build up that commerce as a result of the duly convicted and servitude definition. Now, although the 13th Amendment in 1865 to the Constitution of the United States that formally abolished, although the words slavery and slaves are never mentioned in the Constitution, and I spoke earlier about forefathers. So, and I utilize that word in a broad sense for the simple reason you have to look at the founders that created the Constitution. And even though it's supposed to be applied to all United States citizens, we were written into the Constitution.
I just want to remind you, not to cut you off, but you want to keep that microphone because you're saying some very important stuff.
Okay.
And I want to make sure it's well heard. So make sure you keep the microphone just up a little closer to you.
Okay.
I know you get intense when you start talking about this stuff. So,
you got that right.
Yes, sir.
Even though we were written into the Constitution through the 13th and the 14th Amendment, as Mr. Pate had said, slavery applied, especially back in the 17 and the 1800s, it applied to individuals that were duly convicted of crimes, basically in the South, and would imprison these individuals, and these individuals would be farmed out to the communities in the South during this particular period of time to work on these farms for little wages, if not any at all. Mr. Pate has brought it up to the present, and I spoke about the prison complex that was created through the enactment of the 1984 Sentencing Reform Act, which allowed these federal and state prisons to be built in rural communities where they had suffered loss of land, no jobs. So the opportunities became relevant to rural communities because it provided jobs and opportunities by working within the prison system. Now, Mr. Pate spoke about African Americans and other minorities, but it's across the board. Everybody suffers slavery within the prison system because they're forced to work at a ridiculous wage, and they work at that ridiculous wage for like 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And they're required to pay restitutions, they're required to pay fines, some of them are required to pay for their own housing, especially on the state level. As I understand, Iowa now charges each inmate that gets convicted in Iowa, you have to pay rent in prison. Now, most people...
Well, now, wait a minute. Now, and you think about, with all the money that the prison systems are making, okay?
Well, they're funded by the state and the government.
Okay, well, all the money that's coming in by the penal systems.
Through taxes.
Through taxes. You have private sectors at a lot of the minimum camps.
That's right.
And you look at the money, okay? Now, if you work private sector, 80%, I think it's 80% of that money goes back into the institution in one way or another. Rather it's taking 20% here, paying for your fines, taking 15% here, paying restitution, whatever it is.
Right.
Okay. It's coming back in, and then there's also a big part of that money that goes into a funding system through that prison.
Okay, and if I may interject, I don't want the audience to ever get it misconstrued that we're talking about unfairness from the perspective that when people commit crimes, I committed a crime too.
Right.
I went to prison, served my time. I worked at a slave wage for 25 calendars. Prior to that, I worked at a slave wage in prison. So most people will say, well, you got what you had coming. But as you spoke to, Department of Corrections, it's about correcting behavior that's offensive to our society. Rehabilitation. You don't hear these words no more after 1994 because it wasn't into that. Our government and state legislators wasn't into that. So the narrative got changed. And it got changed because, as you said, the private sector, the rural communities were benefiting from the duly convicted, imprisoned servitude that was occurring through the law.
Sure. And you look at the Eighth Amendment. You look at the Eighth Amendment under cruel and unusual punishment. Now, there's been a lot of things that have been turned over through that 13th Amendment when they go back to the Eighth Amendment under the cruel and unusual punishment. So what I'm thinking is, if we can come together with the community and the country for that matter, please, for those of you who are tuned into this episode right now on YouTube, I encourage you to reach out to me. you can go to the imageforlives.com and look at the website. Or you can call me direct, 515. Well, I better not give my number out to everyone. But you could email me. Go through the website. Please get in contact with me. We're on a very, very important topic here, and we need some help, okay? We have people all across the country, okay, in our United States. I feel that one way we can make the United States better is if we deal with our prison systems, if we can correct the people that are coming back out into society so that we can not only help them, but help our society. And then for those that are maybe stuck in there for long periods of time, we want to make sure that we're still able to correct and try to change, their way of thinking. And I think that there's money and resources to be able to do that. It just takes somebody that really cares.
Okay, let me say this here, Mr. Pay. Criminality is predicated upon conditions and circumstances in life. And so that's a real complex problem because a lot of people don't understand those factors or those elements. So even though we're sitting here talking about the 13th Amendment, and I want to allude to this here, there's a documentary that was out there which was called the 13th Amendment. And the sister that filmed that documentary, I can't remember how long ago it was, but I know it was a nationwide acclaimed documentary. And I watched it, but I can't remember her name at this particular point in time. And that's a real good viewing for anybody that hasn't viewed it. But from the perspective that we're talking about the 13th Amendment is we want to see, as Mr. Pate has said, we want to see a development within the correction system so that they're not utilizing prisoners as slaves. Meaning, in order for a person to have an opportunity or a chance at rehabilitation in life after committing a nonviolent offense, he has to have or she has to have the means to do that. Through servitude and slavery, within the prison complex, that's not going to happen. Because again, as I alluded to, when you're in prison, you're still taxed to live in prison. Ain't nothing in prison free, nothing. So you're still taxed even with those minimal slave wages that individuals in prison are receiving. But if we hope to redeem a prisoner, we have to provide opportunities other than the lip service that has been given by the narrative from the administration that comes from government and state legislators. Now, I'm not blaming today's state and government legislators because this narrative started a long time ago. That's what makes the issue of the 13th Amendment as it is tied to the prison complex so broad, so immense in its content. So I would hope that each individual would take the time to understand that complex narrative dealing with the 13th Amendment and how it's tied to our communities, because it affects each and every one of our community. Taxpayers pay over $30,000 a year to keep a person in prison, and you're not getting your return.
That is correct in a nutshell. And again, just as Brother Daring said, we're not taking away the fact that people who commit crimes, have to be punished, and that, we still have to have that punishment and that part set up in play. But once a person has gone out of society, when you've handcuffed a person and taken them into another world, that's a punishment right there alone by itself. When a person goes off for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years, they're taken out of society. That's their punishment. And then they have to go back in to get rehabilitated or corrected. Okay, that then becomes the process. And we need to make sure that we're focusing on all of this and understanding that once a person is punished, they shouldn't continue to keep being punished. This does something to the physical help, to the physical and the mental actually mind. It brings trauma, and this is why we have so many people out there that have these different behaviors and disabilities that can't go get help at normal places because it's called psychiatric help now. These are the type of things that's causing a lot of this psychiatric type needs. So again, we want to thank you all for tuning in to the I.M.A.G.E TV podcast. We want to ask you to continue to subscribe. I want to stay on this for a minute. I want to deal with this 13th Amendment until I can really knock a hole into this and we can actually get our senators, our people at the Capitol here in Des Moines on board. We're going to have to actually put in that kind of work and go through all the different loopholes for that. But, I think that this is definitely worth it, for all of our brothers and sisters that are still in those prisons, doing a lot of time, a lot of non-violent offenders who are doing a whole lot of time, who don't have a violent bone in their body, who could be out here working with their families and become productive in the communities. Instead, they're still there. Now, I will give a lot of credit even to Donald Trump in this matter for the bills and stuff that he put into play. The First Step Act, that was great. I mean, that was beautiful. That was the first step, I think, into cracking a lot of holes and issues that need to be dealt with. So, Rome, do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, I just want to, because you brought this up, and I think it's a valid point. I would suggest that people who are in the audience, following the show, take the time to go online, get a dictionary or whatever it is that you have available for you and read the 13th Amendment. I mean, you hear a lot of people. I mean, the 13th Amendment was a vital issue during the Civil Rights Movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, and things of that nature. But other than the documentary and Mr. Pate, you don't hear many people talking about how it's tied into our prison systems. And again, I want to reiterate the fact that it's not about being soft on crime. And I agree with Mr. Pate that, a person commits a crime. I mean, there should be some type of punishment. Well, what better punishment than have these individuals out here taking care of their families and paying taxes and building up our communities than sticking them in prison and they haven't committed a violent act? I mean, it's amazing to me. So if you look at the flip side of what I just said, the reason for that was slavery, servitude. Get these individuals in these prisons, let these major corporations come in and make billions and billions and billions of dollars while our communities is ran under. If you go back to 1984, the Sentencing Reform Act, which I like talking about repetitively, all they said in Congress about what that act was going to do for the communities in the United States, you can't show nothing that the federal government did with all that money that they had forfeited from individuals who had committed a non-violent offense. That money did not go back into our communities. When I finally got out of prison and looked at where I grew up at, it was devastating to me. There was no growth there. There's no economic growth there. Nowhere. So, and again, when they propose these bills, they tell you, yeah, we're going to do this and we're going to do that to help build up your community. We're going to eradicate crime from your communities. Crime's on the increase.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are tuned in to the I.M.A.G.E TV podcast, and we are on YouTube. We've got a lot of things going on right now. We want to also invite you to the Summer Fest at Drake Park. It will be, we'll have two parks. We'll have 10 different organizations. Okay. There'll be a cookout, a basketball tournament, a softball tournament at the other park. I can't remember the name right now, but Drake Park will be one of them.
Okay.
I'll be there. Image for Lives will be there. Positive Achievements will be there, and we'll have some other organizations there.
ReformCrimeSentencing.org will be there.
Okay. Reform.sentencing.org will be there.
ReformCrimeSentencing.org.
ReformCrimeSentencing.org. will be there. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we want to invite all of you to come to this. It'll be, again, at Drake Park from August 13th from 1 to 5 p.m. And then we've also got, I want to give a shout out to Polish King, Lou Parks, and Polish King, his little food truck. Polish King is doing good. He's making his way to a lot of different events. Positive Achievements. Ralph Hall has started his nonprofit with Positive Achievements. And then, we've got a lot of other ones that I just can't think of off the top of my head. But we always remember Dads with a Purpose, Pastor Bell, and Brother Michael Winfrey out there in Texas, Dallas, Texas area. Tony Mark Knowles doing great things with Cliponomics. And so we've got a lot of people, also right here in the Des Moines community are doing some things to kind of help things grow and kind of break out of that niche of us not having anything.
Let me add this here for people that are in the Iowa and they're coming to Des Moines. There's a barber shops. I can't remember the name, and I feel bad about that. Out on the south side. I don't know if it's Imperial Cuts or whatever, but
what street is it on?
It's all on the south side.
Okay.
And they provide free haircuts for individuals that are getting out of prison. The next time I get on the I.M.A.G.E show, I will have that name, and because I know that they're gonna be highly upset because I forgot.
So you're giving the information. It's on the south side of Des Moines.
Yes, sir.
They give free haircuts for guys coming out of prison.
Coming out of prison. It's ran by a family. And
we'll have that information for you more.
That's right.
On the very next episode.
I'll
make sure.
Yeah, make sure you do. Yes, matter of fact, I'm gonna get it for you today.
Okay, good.
I just wanted individuals that were up there at Fort Des Moines or in the halfway houses in Des Moines to know if they don't have the finances, because like you alluded to, coming out of prison, working at them slave wages, individuals don't have money to get a haircut, buy hygiene, buy clothing and things of that nature. You have provided to a lot of individuals coming out of prison. You aided and assisted me when I came out of prison. I'm grateful for that, as a lot of other people have, across the United States. And I'm grateful for that. And I don't want it to appear that I couldn't express appreciation for that particular fact. So, and I'm thankful for that. So,
all right. So, ladies and gentlemen, I also want to give a shout out to Kevin Dobbins, the late Kevin Dobbins, my first cousin. We always donate our podcast to you, and the whole fentanyl movement from people passing away in our communities across the country. I saw that Master P's daughter passed away, and I believe fentanyl had something to do with that.
Terrible.
So listen,
tragedy.
Continue to tune in to the I.M.A.G.E TV podcast. We got to go. We are completely out of time. We'll see you next time on the I.M.A.G.E TV podcast.